Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you so much for joining us. Very excited for this webinar today, talking about a super important but often ignored topic for a lot of companies. People are streaming in here. We'll get officially started in a second, but I would love to start out with hearing where you are joining from. I see Anna and Andrew and Andy and Austin all in alphabetical order here, and Barb and Bill and Brian and Kaylee and Casey and Craig and Dave, and it goes on and on. Haley and Mary and Matt and Sean and Stephen. So yes, in the chat, Ripley, New York, very good. First, Vancouver, BC, Mukilteo, Vermont, Montana, Illinois. All right, Kira, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Amanda, all right, Stephen in Dallas. Ocala, Florida, Massachusetts, Toronto, our friends from Canada, awesome. Montana, Sterling, Virginia, data centers country. Okay, Orlando, New York, Costa Mesa,
Nice.
Poland, fantastic. All right, Chandler, Arizona. We have places all over the country, the world. That's fantastic. Well, thank you all very much for joining us today. For those that aren't familiar with who I am, my name is Paul Van Meter. I am one of the co-founders of ProShop. I've been in the manufacturing industry for too many years, owned my own CNC shop for about 17 years and then launched ProShop a few years ago. So I am excited to be joined today by Brian and Mike from SideChannel. So Brian, if you'd introduce SideChannel to everyone, that'd be great.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Can everybody hear me okay?
Sure can.
Excellent. Hey, Brian Hoagley. I'm managing partner and founder for SideChannel. We are a firm focused solely on the mid-market and helping organizations realize, build out, mature their cybersecurity programs. We traditionally do this with a virtual CISO offering, and our main differentiator is we bring in and I hire former enterprise CISOs, such as Mike Waters here, who's joining us, and our resident expert on the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, otherwise known as CMMC. So really looking forward to the discussion today, and this is a great partnership, Paul, with ProShop and SideChannel. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, so our customers are largely small to medium-sized machine shops and others in the manufacturing space. Sorry about the train going by. I don't have control over their schedule. And many of them are in the defense and aerospace industry. And so CMMC obviously is looming for anyone in that space. And whether they're in that space or not, cybersecurity should be top of mind for any manufacturer out there, regardless of whether they support the defense industrial base or not, right? So why don't you take it away, Mike? And just for today, I guess a couple of housekeeping items. As questions come up, please use the Q&A. It's much easier to manage questions there than it is in the chat. If you just want to say hi in the chat, that's great, but please put Q&A into the Q&A and we will get to them at the end. I think that's the main housekeeping item. So we're going to turn off our cameras, I think, here for a little bit, and then we'll turn them back on at the end when we get to Q&A and wrap up. So thanks everyone again for joining us, and look forward to this content.
all righty. So I'm Mike Waters. I've been in IT for many decades and cybersecurity probably since 1998. Although I don't think we called it cybersecurity back then. A big chunk of my career was 10 or 11 years building out the information security program, the internal information security defenses at a major defense contractor. Learned a ton there. Thought I knew what I was doing when I started, learned how much there was to learn, and spent the last 5 years helping other organizations. And been with SideChannel for a little over a year now. So we're going to talk about the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. We're going to talk about cybersecurity in general first, and compliance frameworks. And then we're going to talk about the special requirements that the Department of Defense has, and then an approach to CMMC. And then we've got a whole bunch of resources, including how ProShop can help you on your journey. So the cybersecurity, I've been in IT for a long time, and cybersecurity is not a technical issue. It's a business issue, and it's important that we all understand that because that's how we make it work. Some terminology I want to make sure we all have on the same page with. Cybersecurity is about protecting sensitive information. If it's not sensitive, you're probably not worried about protecting it. And when we say protecting it, the things we're trying to protect are the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of that information. So confidentiality is what most people think of first, keeping secret stuff secret so that only authorized users can look at the stuff. And that is one of the three key pieces. Another part is integrity. You don't want random people making random changes to your data. So only authorized changes being made is information integrity. And then availability, it's in the news a lot lately. It's making sure that sensitive information, that you can get to it when you need it. So ransomware is an attack on availability. You can't get to your data. So that's the three aspects of information security: protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of sensitive information. So when I say it's a business issue, it's because it's about people, employees, contractors, customers, processes, and technology, all managing the risk to your confidentiality, integrity, and availability of sensitive information, because you use sensitive information. You follow a process to do something with that sensitive information, whether it's placing an order, designing a part, receiving specifications from a client, and then turning that into an actual device. It's all about using a process with the sensitive information to deliver something. And technology is just part of that whole picture. It's there to help make your life easier, help you do your job and manage the risk. It's just part of the picture. Some people get wrapped up, focused on the technology, overlook the people and process aspects, and they do so to their own detriment, because you have to do all three: people, process, and technology. And cybersecurity overall, people, process, and technology, is such a large concept that there are various frameworks to help you get organized about how to do it right. And there are a lot of different frameworks. They are almost all aiming at the same goals. They phrase them differently, they approach them differently, they prioritize them differently. So you have to pick a cybersecurity framework that fits your business. And again, it has to fit your business. And there are a ton of them. So the United States, unfortunately, right now has no national standard for privacy or cybersecurity. Various states have them, and some states are very powerful. New York and California have privacy standards and, to a certain extent, security standards. The European Union created the GDPR, which is focused on privacy. Privacy is somewhat different from security. Privacy is about protecting consumer or individual information, whereas information security is about protecting business type information. So they align in many ways, but they have different intents. The line there, NIST, the National Institutes of Standard Technology. Since I heard there's somebody, at least one person from outside the US, I'll make sure people understand that's a US federal agency. Department? Agency. National Institutes of Standards and Technology. They create standards, and they have a lot of them. International Standards Organization, ISO, also has a lot of different standards. ISO 27001 is a standard that many people have heard of and many people try to comply with. CIS, the Center for Internet Security, and AICPA also provide standards and guidance on how to do information security. And there are industry vertical standards. The credit card industry has PCI, healthcare interest has high trust. Again, specific to those industries. So when I go back to the top of the slide, select a framework for your cybersecurity program. It has to make business sense. So if you don't do anything with healthcare, probably doesn't make sense for you to pick high trust. If you don't do anything with credit cards, probably don't need to pick PCI. So it's a business decision. What are we going to try and use to guide our program? And then all of these standards, almost all of them, are voluntary. You don't have to follow any one of those. That's why you get to pick which one makes sense for you. And almost none of them require a third-party audit. You decide whether or not you're complying with the standard based on your best efforts and your own internal audits if you want, that sort of thing. As a result, the last sentence on this page, there's a lot of organizations that say that they are complying or that they are driven by or adhere to different standards, but that doesn't mean they've been certified or audited. So it's just, yeah, we use this standard to drive our security efforts. That's kind of splitting hairs. Now, you're on this call probably because you're interested in CMMC. So the U.S. Department of Defense has special requirements and special considerations for you about which compliance framework you should pick, because they have one that they want you to use. So the United States Department of Defense has a massive supply chain, estimated like 300,000 organizations that do everything from lawn care to delivering complete weapons systems. That's just a huge number of businesses. And it shares a tremendous amount of sensitive information with those organizations so that they can deliver the products and services the Department of Defense needs. Now, the sensitive information is not classified. That's a different ball game, different environment. We'll talk about that another day. So they share a ton of sensitive information, and it's now called Controlled Unclassified Information, or CUI. And that information gets handed out to roughly 300,000 organizations. And that actually creates a very large attack surface for anybody who wants to steal that data. So the Department of Defense decided that they needed to provide guidance to their supply chain on how to protect that information. So they worked with the National Institute of Standards Technology, several academic institutions, Johns Hopkins, Carnegie Mellon, industry leaders, and other governments, or allied governments, and to develop a standard called the Cyber Maturity Model Certification, the CMMC. That's been out there for a couple of years. We're actually up to version 2 now. The CMMC did not just start from scratch. They looked at existing standards and tried to build on the best of what they had. So there's references in the CMMC to NIST 800-171 and ISO and several other standards, Australian standards, UK standards. So this standard is built on all these other standards. And it was recently re-updated. November 2021, version 2 came out that simplified things substantially. There are 3 levels of certification in the CMMC. And the level of certification you require depends on the level of sensitive information, controlled and classified information you might be handling. So the first level, level 1, foundational. There are 17 controls. These are pretty straightforward basic controls that you should be doing anyway. Also, if you are dealing with the United States government, you are probably handling federal contract information. It's FCI. And there is a completely separate law in the Federal Acquisition Register, FAR 52204-21. And in that, you should be complying with this level 1 17 controls already, because that law has been around for a long time and it's in the contracts. But that is exactly equivalent to level 1 of CMMC version 2. If you're handling more sensitive information, more sensitive than federal contract information, so if you're handling controlled unclassified information, you need to be at level 2 in the CMMC. That's 110 controls. It's equivalent to NIST 800-171, which has been around since 2016 or 17, which you should be complying with now already also. CMMC is a successor to NIST 800-171. If you're not doing 800-171 yet, that's something you need to get onto right away. because you're supposed to be doing it according to the federal acquisition and the DoD requirements. The next level up is level 3, which is still under development, but it's more than the 110 controls for level 2. And it's for organizations that handle more sensitive, but still unclassified information. It's called controlled defense information and controlled technical information. So that's still under development. And these levels of compliance are compounding. So you can't be at level 2 unless you've already done everything in level 1. And you can't be at level 3 unless you've done everything in levels 1 and 2. So you have to start at the bottom and work your way up. Make sure you're doing all these things. The far right column of the table is important. I mentioned earlier the standards are voluntary and don't require third-party assessment. So the CMMC does require a third-party assessment. So level 1, not so much. It's only 17 controls. You need to have a C-level person sign off saying, yes, we are doing these 17 things. So that's Chief Information Officer, your COO, your CEO needs to be able to legally sign off and say, yes, we're doing these 17 things. Level 2, there will be third-party assessment every 3 years. That process is also still being developed. We might start seeing more of those assessments later this year, but they will be coming. For organizations at level 3, there will be, again, every 3 years, an assessment, and it will be run by a government agency. Still under development. And we can, during the Q&A, we can start putting questions out now, but I can address questions. This is a lot to absorb. So why should you think about the CMMC for your organization? Well, it's a good framework. It's certainly worth considering. And it's been developed not in a vacuum. It's developed by a bunch of different people in the government, but also industry experts and academia, and a lot of collaboration, a lot of thought has gone into it. So it's a very well-designed standard. So that makes it worth considering for your organization. Also, since there's going to be third-party certification required, when you tell somebody that you comply with CMMC level 2 and that you're certified at level 2, that can reassure your business partners that you really are doing everything right. I know it's not uncommon for organizations to receive letters with surveys on them saying, tell us how you do all these different things. Well, if you can just say, I am certified at CMMC level 2, you can get on with your day and not have to try and answer all these long questionnaires that are coming out. Similarly, if your business partners tell you they are certified at CMMC level 2, then you know that they are doing a good job because they have gone through all those controls and they've been audited by a third party. So it's very reassuring. The third bullet there is, if you're doing business with the DoD, either directly or as a sub, it's going to be required. 800-171 is required now. CMMC is going to be required as soon as they finish the rulemaking. So you're going to have to do this to continue doing business with the DoD. So that's a good reason to choose it. And then the fact is, so much energy has been put into developing this standard. Other agencies outside the Department of Defense have been looking at the CMMC and saying, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Why don't we just use that? And other governments have been doing the same. Allied governments have been looking at the standard since many of them participated in the development of it and are considering adopting it for their own use. So it's not that this is narrowly focused on the US Department of Defense. It is entirely likely that the CMMC standard will become very broadly used across government supply chains. And then even if I'm not dealing with the DoD, if I can tell somebody that I'm CMMC certified level 2, that should answer a lot of questions for any business partner. So it's my grand statement there. CMMC is likely to become the standard because of the fact that there's third-party certification required, that it's well-designed, and it's going to be required by at least 300,000 organizations. So it's going to be forced into the business environment. Compliance approach, what you should be doing. So first thing you should do is figure out if you are doing business with the Department of Defense. If you are, you need to be doing NIST 800-171 and probably then the CMMC. If you're doing business with any other federal agencies, it also seems like a probable you should be doing these things. Second step is determine, are you using some cybersecurity framework right now? I mentioned earlier that they all seem to aim at the same goals, so you can map from one to another. So if you started out using a different framework, you can certainly map what you've done to the CMMC. It's not wasted effort. It's not like if you were doing the SIS Top 20, that you got to start all over again. Those are still important things, and the CMMC relates to those. So consider using CMMC for yourselves, because it might be required, and it can map to anything else you've already done. Certification for organizations is targeted to be required by October 2025. Timelines shift, but that is a goal date to keep in mind. If you need to comply with CMMC, you need to be working towards being certified by October 2025. If you'd like to get a sense of how your security program stacks up right now, there's a link there in the presentation materials, calculatesprs.com, that for free you can go through and answer a bunch of questions, and it'll tell you how close you are to NIST 800-171 compliance. The SPRS in that URL refers to the score you get when you are working towards 800-171 compliance. So if you go and use that tool, you can find out how close you are to 800-171 compliance, which is the same as CMMC level 2 compliance. Again, it's a free tool. Just takes a few minutes for you to go through and answer the questionnaires, and then push a button and it tells you what you need to work on. There are a bunch of acronyms because it's a government thing. So I thought you should know about these things as you dive into CMMC, because you will run into them over and over again. So they're the first one, CMMC accreditation body. That is an independent organization. It's not part of the US government. It's not part of the Department of Defense, but it was specifically created to help manage the CMMC implementation process. So it's the CMMC AB. They are in charge of ensuring that training is developed and that people delivering services are appropriately certified and trained, et cetera, get the auditors in place. Individuals involved in CMMC include registered practitioners. Those are people like myself who've gone through training and taken tests and background checks, et cetera. And we are authorized to provide pre-audit consulting service. Certified professionals is the next step up. They can do as the consulting as a registered practitioner can, but can also participate in formal CMMC assessments. Participate. And then there's the top of the heap, certified assessors. These are people who have gone through extra training and checks to ensure that they can lead actual formal assessments. And it's important that these people go through these rigorous checks and training, because the results of their assessment determine whether or not you can do business with the Department of Defense. So it's important that they do a good job auditing your compliance and give you an honest answer, so that that you can deliver services to the Department of Defense as required. And then there are businesses, organizations involved, service providers. Registered practitioner organizations, RPOs, provide RPs for consulting engagements. So I work for SideChannel. SideChannel is an RPO, and I'm an RP. There you go. And then the next is the certified third-party auditing organizations, C3POs. I'm sure it's inspired by Star Wars. They can provide certified professionals or certified assessors. There are not a lot of C3POs or CAs. There are so few of them right now that the assignments to do audits are being managed by the CMMC AB. See the top of the slide. Registered practitioners are the people you need to talk to now through registered practitioner organizations to ensure that you get a pre-audit done so we can make sure you're on the right track to get things ready for when the auditors show up. Let's see. Some important websites. So the Department of Defense CMMC website, it's out of the ACD, which is the Acquisition Department, Office of the Secretary of Defense.mil, CMMC. I'm sure you could Google it, but these are the official sites. The CMMC accreditation body that I mentioned on the previous slide, they have their own website. Again, it's not part of the government. They're just they're facilitating the implementation of CMMC. And then SideChannel Consulting, our own website, sidechannel.com. As I mentioned, SideChannel is an RPO, and we have quite a few RPs on staff as well. And now, our partners at ProShop. We talk about how ProShop can help you with this journey because there's a lot to do. And if you got to start from scratch, that's kind of challenging. So ProShop, I'm going to hand it back over.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Before I get into my part, I just had a couple of questions maybe that I know we're going to have formal Q&A at the end, but a couple things came up. So October 2025,
Yep.
that is, some people might think that's a really long way off. Why should I get started today? But then when I saw your comment about how many C3 PAOs there are, or how few there are, can you just talk a little bit about about timelines and what people might expect and what's going to happen when everyone goes to flood to try to get their audits and all that?
Sure.
Hey, Paul, this is Brian. Actually, Mike, do you mind if I take this?
Go for it.
So one of the things that we're going to see, and I'll be on camera so everyone can see me here. One of the things that we're going to see is I think there's only about 5 registered C3 PAOs today. Out of the gate, the anticipation and kind of the discussion that is kind of coming through is those that are going to be at that level 3 or kind of expected tier level 2, they're going to be probably front of the line to have to go through certification. So think about your Lockheeds, your Boeings, your Raytheons. They're going to have to get their certification and probably have to go through that first. So with a minute amount of registered C3 PAOs, their focus is probably going to be towards those first. The other half of that is when you look at other areas that go through a certification and get some type of accreditation. So if anybody's ever been through a SOC 2 Type 1 or a SOC 2 Type 2, where you build a program, your security program, and then you have a third-party auditor come in and assess you, you have to remember that there's a readiness period that goes on first. So you have to get your organization ready, you have to be assessed during a time frame, and then you're granted a certification. So you really need to start thinking about if you plan on being certified by 2025, back that up 6 months, identify that you're trying to be certified by early 2025, and then back that up by a year to 2 years to go through the preparation, readiness, make sure that when you bring the auditors in and you pay for them, you are ready for audit. Right. So the reason that the registered practitioners and the readiness groups exist and why that whole thing was created by the CMMC was so that you can actually get ready and prepare for. The worst thing you can do is, one, wait till last minute, try to then line up an auditor, fail your audit, and then be in a position where now you cannot actually be on that government contract. So preparation around this is looking at the timelines, getting realistic about your organization, how long it's going to take you to be prepared, factoring in that you might miss certain things, have to fix them before you can actually go through the accreditation. And then, so really just project manage and back up your timeline. So people should really start thinking about 2023 as their time to really, very latest, begin their journey to get ready. And again, depending on your organization, if you're a larger organization, complex, and you have legacy and technical debt, start sooner. So that's just some feedback there.
Thanks, Brian. Do you expect that there will be such high demand for these auditors that companies will have to get on wait lists and they might not be early enough on the wait list to get certified in time? In which case, what does the government do?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't speak for what the government's going to do, but think about it. If today, and this has been in existence for going on 2 years, right? There's only 5 certified C3PAOs. If they can even accredit 1 per month over the next 2 years, we're looking at a backlog. So yes, lining up your auditor, getting into that queue, being ready, is definitely something that's going to have to happen. I don't know how the DoD is going to address the shortfall of approved and accredited C3PAOs. But this is something that I feel as though the government's going to say, well, we're trying to, and you're just going to have to deal with it. They have been very clear, the DFARS ruling that's going to come out, if you are not certified by and through CMMC, you cannot bid on those contracts which have those requirements in them.
Yeah, that's
Pretty strict.
That's a weighty, it's a weighty threat. Yeah.
Let me add to something Brian mentioned, because he mentioned SOC audits. So the CMMC audits will require evidence. So it's not like you can be, get everything ready and then the auditors show up on the next day. They're going to want to see evidence that you're doing the processes that you say you are doing that are required by the standard. So you need to have 6 to 9 months of evidence to demonstrate that this is the way you do things. It's not something you just slap together for the auditors. It's got to be evidence. So there's 3 types of evidence. One is documentation, like log files, or if you say you fill out these types of forms every time you do a change, you need to bring out a pile of forms to show that you've done those changes.
Right.
That's one type of evidence. The second type of evidence is interviews, where they will interview the people who are involved in the processes, not the CIO, but the people who are actually doing the processes, unless it's a process involves CIO. And the third type of evidence is testing, where they will actually check and see if something is working. So if you say you have a control that fires off an alert whenever an unauthorized device is plugged into the network, they will plug a device into the network and see if somebody comes running down the hall to see what it was. So you do have to accumulate evidence. So waiting to the last minute is not a successful strategy. You need to be ready with things in place and collecting evidence 6 to 9 months before the deadline for getting audited. Okay.
Wow, good advice. Okay, well, I'm going to come on camera as well to go over this part of things. So how can ProShop help? So ProShop can help in a few ways, but not, obviously there's only a limited scope where an ERP system or QMS system or MES or whatever overlaps with the standard and the requirements, right? So there's a ton of things that are completely outside of anything that the ProShop might be involved with. But as sort of the digital backbone of many customers, it plays a pretty crucial role. So when we first learned about this coming down the pipeline, 3 years or so ago, we researched it, we talked with customers, we did a lot of reading, and we decided to start building a bunch of features. So for the last 3 years, we have built a whole suite of security features, which there'll be some screenshots in just a minute here. So ProShop customers today can, if you are a security administrator in ProShop, which is a new thing that we added, you can go to that tab and start configuring those settings. Now, I should mention, those are things that are currently in ProShop today. We are continually building new features, looking at what the requirements are, and seeing if there's more places that we can add value and make this easier for customers to meet the requirements. Just literally very practical types of things that matter on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, you can go to the next slide, Mike. So there's a couple different areas. So identification and authentication is one of them. I'm sure Mike and Brian will tell you this, the number one weakest link in any security system is the people, right? People doing stupid things, using super weak passwords, giving credentials to someone that they maybe shouldn't give credentials to, or allow them some access into their system. So we have put quite a bit of work into password complexity regimes. So we no longer allow the use of the most 100,000 most commonly used or weak passwords. In fact, there's quite a bit of configurability in the different password schemes that we allow, including the ability to preclude certain phrases or words from being any part of any of your users' passwords. So you could remove your company name or your street address or anything that might that a third-party person might use to guess, what a password might be. So you can put as many of those in there as you want. And then, of course, probably maybe most important of all is we have full multi-factor authentication with FIPS compliant security keys. So I actually have one right here. So we use these for our own company. So these are little YubiKeys. So these have to be plugged into the device that you are logging in with. And then you press this little button right here, and that generates a one-time code that's only good for a certain period of time that will not allow you to log into ProShop unless you have this physically with you. So even if someone does, guess or hack your password, or you inadvertently give your credentials to someone that shouldn't have them, they still will not be able to log in without that physical key. So you can go to the next slide, Mike. All right, access control. So this has to do with just physically limiting access of who can log in and rules around that. So we've built the ability to completely configure unsuccessful attempts. So you could lock that down to a very, very low number. So someone that's using like an automatic password generator would be blocked almost instantly. You can provide and generate your own security rules that would be required probably under the NIST requirements in CMMC. One of the big things is there are people in your company that are going to have to be administrators, and administrators by nature have quite a bit of broad access to data. And when they're doing that administrative role, they're only doing that a very small portion of their time. So we have built the ability for administrators to basically be able to browse and use the system as a non-privileged account most of the time. And then they can just access and turn on sort of that administrative privilege only when they're doing things that do require, sort of that advanced functionality. Same thing with yeah, I guess like our edit log, for example, that would be a new feature that allows you to see any changes that were made into the database, into the system at all. And normally you don't need to be able to access or use that, but you can turn that on when you are, say, going through an audit or something like that, or doing some of that testing that Mike talked about. And then, of course, yeah.
I just want to comment. I have clients who are struggling with these facets right now, and
Okay.
And what you're doing with ProShop is like, yep, that would have solved that problem. That would have solved that
Sure.
problem. So I just want to reiterate that these things that you're talking about really are valuable and important for being able to comply with this standard.
Yeah, I mean, again, they're just super practical things that are on a daily basis. You got to be able to deal with them. And if your main software system doesn't do them, how else do you do it, right? Do you do some weird IT thing where you're using virtual machine, you're doing, remote connections, or who knows what? I'm not the IT guy, so I couldn't even say, but yeah, I know it can be ultra complex. And again, whether or not you are ultimately going to go for CMMC, just having some of these really basic sort of daily use tools can really have a measurable impact on the security of your system. We have heard about and even know some of our customers that have been hacked, and they likely would not have been hacked had some of these functions, been in place for their company.
Yeah, Paul, you raise a really great point. I mean, even if you aren't held to, having to meet a certain level, honestly, a really good security posture is evident in at least the level 1 controls. We're talking about less than 20 controls that you can put into your organization to meet. And the number of things that you're doing here address those. But like basic security, I mean, you would lock your house when you leave it, right? You might not need a big fancy alarm system. You don't need a patrol, you don't need armed guards at your house, but you lock your doors when you leave your house. At least, most of us do. So it's simple, basic things. And, when you look at Microsoft's data, when you look at other reports that come out, like a majority of attacks that are successful take advantage of very basic fundamental security components. Misuse of administrative privileges, just using a username and password. Again, very, very basic things. So if you walk away from anything from this conversation today, don't look at, oh, I don't have to do anything around CMMC. It's actually a great guiding light. Level 1 controls are, I would consider basic enough and standard enough to be able to implement in any organization. They're not going to break the bank, and they're going to at least set you up with a decent foundation. That's why, CMMC was built by very smart people who thought about this and created that level 1 for a reason, because it's kind of the bare minimum, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that, Brian. If you go to the next slide, Mike. All right, so here is a screenshot of our new security tab that's in the config settings area. And this is available only for people that have the security administrator privilege, which is a new privilege in ProShop that we didn't used to have. So top of the list there, security notice, and there's another page where you can configure what that actually says. Require brand new users to reset their passwords on first login. Maximum successful attempts, terminating sessions that have, various, I don't want to read them all. But just, really basic settings that you can configure to be as tightly controlled as you want. And obviously requirements that passwords expire, password validation rules. You can see that one even says CMMC. So that's a configuration that has already been mapped or configured in the back end to meet the requirements of the standard. And obviously, if things like that change in the future, we will update the features to always be compliant with the latest versions. So quite a bit of stuff that you can do there. And if you jump to the next page there, Mike. So here's just an example. This is something I just grabbed from our page where we can manage those security tokens, security keys. So this is actually screenshotted out of our own system. So every employee in the company has their own key. They have their sessions that are launched when they open their browser and log in. You can set maximum ages, of course. So you could even lock that down to just be a few hours. So someone couldn't be logged in much more than like their single business day. And you can see across the top there's just quite a bit of other, I don't have screenshots for all of those, but quite a bit of other areas and pages for that. Can you go to the next page, Mike? So here's actually this is the page where we have the one-time password devices. So today we just have these physical keys. In the future, it's very likely we'll include some other options as well, but these FIPS compliant keys, I don't even know what FIPS compliant means. I've just heard our people use them. Mike, you probably know.
Yeah, but I'm a nerd. Yeah.
What does FIPS compliant actually mean?
Federal Information Processing Standard.
Okay.
Comes another federal standard about how things are done to make sure that they're secure and they're not easily corrupted.
Okay, so is it kind of the gold standard for hardware keys? And there are kinds that are not FIPS compliant. Is that the case?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, practically speaking, you can issue these to your people. I think they're like $20 or something. Keep track of them, see how often they're used, when they're used. If someone loses them, you can disable that one so it can't be used again. Issue them a new one. A lot of people I know put them on like lanyards that are like attached to themselves, so they walk up to their computer. There's even this one even has a little you can read that, but a little Wi-Fi, or I don't know if it's NFC, so it doesn't actually be plugged in. You can just swipe it right by the computer if it has a reader. and that just makes that super easy to make sure you're using that two-factor authentication in a very lightweight way that doesn't take a ton of overhead. So that's one. You can go to the next slide. All right, infrastructure and how ProShop is hosted. So the vast majority of our clients use our cloud services, and we use AWS exclusively, Amazon Web Services. And for any clients that are dealing with ITAR data or will need to go to CMMC, they use our GovCloud option. So that is a specific region or area, physical, hosting location on AWS, where they only allow US persons, and they have all sorts of additional security protocols. So clients can do that option. And we have had, this is anecdotal, but we have had clients that have been recently audited by some of the primes who have said that their GovCloud instance is acceptable to them. We've had other clients say that they have customers that say you cannot host anything on the cloud, whether or not that's a misinterpretation of something, I'm not sure, but that's why we also have our on-prem deployment option. So we have clients that are completely on-prem and even totally air-gapped, where their internal network, where they're handling all this CUI and data, is completely disconnected from the outside world at all. So we do require access to that on occasion to do updates, to, maybe upgrade your version of ProShop. So we'll connect for a very brief period of time, often being monitored by the customer as that happens, do the upgrade, and then disconnect again, and then they reconnect, or they then take their air-gapped network offline again. So there's definitely options. For us, even for on-prem clients, the product is identical. There's no different on-prem version of ProShop. It's the same exact product, same exact code base. So it's easier for us to manage, but we just update it on a less frequent basis. So both options exist. And I think go to the next slide there, Mike. All right, so this is a really important one. And that is protecting the actual CUI. And I'm actually just writing a blog about this. So one of the, Mike, you mentioned earlier, this very large attack surface, like all these 300,000 vendors in the industrial base. On an individual basis with customers, there is CUI in most shops. If you walk into most shops, there's going to be controlled and classified information everywhere, right? It is in the download folder of their local laptop of their salespeople. It's in filing cabinets. It's in physical drawings that are floating around the shop that have been stuffed into people's toolboxes. It's on their servers, of course. It's in the backseat of the car of the salesperson that took a drawing from their customer, right? It's all over the place. So one of the things that we do, which I believe is very different than any of our competitors, is we have an entire backend file system that is managed by ProShop. And this is available, of course, to cloud customers and on-prem clients, that has very configurable access based on ProShop's authentication, including that two-factor or multi-factor authentication. And what's unique about it is that, let's say you are out on the shop floor and you pull up the latest approved drawing for that work order you're working on. When you click the link, of course, it's based on your permissions. If you do have permission, it can open that in a browser tab right there at your machine. And the important part is that file is in memory only. And as soon as you close that tab, it is gone, and you never actually copied that or had it local to that hard drive. So when you think about the way we do this, even when you're getting files from a customer, for example, let's say they give you a login to their client portal, right, where you go download your drawings and models and customer POs and things like that. If you copy those directly into the ProShop file system, those never existed on your local network at all. So can, dramatically limit the footprint, if you call it, of where you're needing to store and then manage that data. So I think, and Brian, you can, or Mike, you can back me up on this. If you are really limiting where you are actually storing data, that makes it vastly simpler to protect it, because there's just far fewer places where you actually have that information. So that's one
correct.
thing
You
that's
want to
just,
you want to have a perimeter of and be able to identify where the CUI is traveling, and if you can, the more you can constrain that, the better it is. The easier it is for you to identify the perimeter and to control it.
right. Yep. Awesome. Yeah, I think next slide. I think we're to Q&A. Yes, we have about 10 minutes left. We have a few here that have been coming in, so let me go through them. Stephen asks, how do you handle your YubiKeys at the end of a workday? What would you say to that, Mike?
Well, you definitely have to control access to your physical access devices, whether they're door keys to secure areas or YubiKeys. You have to ensure that you're maintaining control of them, and that there has to be a policy and a process for it. It depends on the circumstances. So
what would you say is a best practice for a medium-sized company that is using physical hardware keys like that?
So they're typically issued to individual users to carry with them at all times. So they need to have a policy in place about this is how you take care of your YubiKey. So probably doesn't go well in your pocket with your car keys. So you need to provide specific advice about how they should store them and keep them. But usually the YubiKey travels with the user. So you need to ensure the users know they're not to share them, for instance.
Yeah. But if they leave at the end of the day, do they store their YubiKey somewhere at work in a locked area or something like that?
That is an option also. Brian, did you have a
comment? That definitely an option. I would think about your YubiKey like you would think about the door, the key to the front door of your headquarters.
Yeah.
How would you treat that? If you have to have that on you, you can have that on you. Don't just leave it around at the house, but keep it within some type of physical control, right? And access.
Yeah.
So think
don't
about
leave
it that
it
way.
Plugged into your laptop when you walk away from your laptop.
Yeah, definitely don't do that. Yeah.
Right. Yep. Okay. Oh yes, of course. Do you have any customers that access ProShop through an enclave environment? If so, how would two-factor authentication work with the YubiKeys? I don't know what an enclave environment means. Either of you know what that means? Is that like a VPN?
So I think your GovCloud example is a good example. So an enclave is any protected area, really.
Okay.
So you can establish an on-prem enclave or a cloud enclave, but it's just a protected area that is, you get a specific set of controls around those.
Right. And our YubiKeys, work regardless of where the hosting is being performed. An enclave is a lockdown virtual environment. Oh, and he says an enclave is a lockdown virtual environment that you access via RDP.
So you'd probably have to be able to pass the USB connection through the RDP session. If you're going to go that, I think that's a great question. Definitely something you want to look at your configs and what you allow to pass through, because the physical key will be physically at you. It needs to somehow be allowed to flow through to the actual target, which would be the ProShop environment. Okay,
Tyler, we'll make a note. Sarah, if you would take that note, we'll get you that answer. Someone asked, is there anything stopping someone from screenshotting a file, taking a screen grab? There's nothing in ProShop that limits that, but I know there certainly are security settings that you can put on individual computers that don't allow that type of functionality. That would be similar to a company not allowing cell phones on the shop floor, because anyone could pull out their phone and take a picture of a screen at any time. So that needs to be part of a more cohesive sort of IT infrastructure, policy making process.
Yeah. In addition, remember this people, processing, technology. So Yes, there are some technical controls that can help with that. But more important is that you should have a policy that says that's not allowed.
Right.
Because then if somebody's doing it, you can say, stop doing that.
Right.
Right.
Give me your phone. You're violating policies, et cetera. So the policy is a key part of that. Not everything can be controlled with technology.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Barb asks, and Barb is clearly a client, we've decided to have our office manager using the admin role. However, I, as a quality manager, will be doing the implementation. Will I be able to change her roles after implementation? Absolutely. You can have someone have more privileged roles for a finite period of time to help with things like onboarding or implementation, and then turn those off as soon as you want to. A couple other questions here. So I had heard, someone says, I had heard that CMMC 2.0 didn't require third-party audits, but the slide that you showed that that still is a thing.
Yeah, it's changed since the initial announcement. The initial announcement was that there wouldn't require third-party audits for level 2, except for some organizations.
Okay.
But recent statements by DoD representatives are like, we looked at the sum and it turned out to be most of the organizations that need level 2 certification. So it's likely that if you need level 2 CMMC certification, it is likely you will need to have a third-party audit, because they looked at, they're like, well, not everybody. Well, maybe everybody.
So a typical, say, machine shop that's making machined parts or small sub-assemblies that go into defense applications, they're going to likely fall in that level 2 area.
Likely, and it goes back to something we talked about before the call started. Are you handling CUI? So the way you know you're handling your CUI is you should be getting information from the government that says CUI on it. It should say controlled unclassified information. It should be labeled by the government. Now, the government, they're not necessarily 100% on labeling things. Sometimes they overclassify, and you'll get stuff that's labeled CUI that is probably not. But if it says it's CUI, you have to treat it like CUI. If you think it's CUI, and because it seems like sensitive government information, like this part needs to have these exact specifications, and it's something you only make for the Department of Defense, that's probably CUI. And if they're not labeling it, you need to actually, your best interest, contact your technical representative at the government and say, is this CUI? And get a definitive answer from them.
Yep. So another question as it relates to ITAR. So is ITAR data the same thing as CUI? How do you think about that?
It is. So I'll shorten it up. ITAR is a category of CUI. CUI includes defense-related things, but it also includes export-controlled information, and ITAR is explicitly export-controlled. So ITAR information is CUI information. It's a category of CUI.
Okay, great. So here's another question. I'm in Canada. How will this apply to me? Or say Australia, for example, or the UK. Can a company in Canada become CMMC certified? Does Canada have an equivalent thing?
So Canada and Australia and UK were involved in developing the CMMC standard. If you currently provide goods or services to the United States Department of Defense, which organizations outside the US definitely do, then yes, it will apply to you. And yes, you can get certified.
So those will Canada have their own C3PAOs? No. Okay.
No, there's not. It's not like Canada has their own CMMC for how to deal with the United States DoD. Just think about this. It doesn't matter where you are. If you support the DoD in any way, you're going to fall underneath CMMC regulations. So you can be in APEC, you could be in Europe, you could be in Australia, Mexico, Canada.
There's a large Italian defense contractor that needs to be CMMC certified. So yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, we are right almost at the top of the hour, and we won't be able to get to all the questions. We'll try our best to get you answers offline for those that have questions that didn't get answered yet. But let's just go to the last slide, just share contact information if people want to get in touch with you all or with us. That is the information. Of course, the recording for this will be sent out to anyone who registered, so you don't need to scribble this all down. and we'll share that in the email as well. But thank you all very much for your time and attention today. Hopefully you found value in this. Thank you, Mike and Brian. Really appreciate the knowledge that you guys shared. Hopefully, again, that was useful to everyone on the Zoom today. Thank you, Tyler and Andrew, Samuel, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you on the next webinar. So have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Great job,
Take care.
everyone. Great job, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.